I was reborn the very night of my wedding. My husband-to-be told me he was impotent. As expected. He said, "From now on, let's not interfere in each other's lives. Don't even think about replacing your sister." I smiled softly and drove a dagger into him. 23 times. Now, his impotence is no longer just a rumor. I returned to that day when I was sent to marry into the Duke's manor in Lavinia's place. At this time, my husband was keeping himself pure for Lavinia, claiming to the outside world that he was unable to perform as a man. Who would have thought Lavinia believed it? She cried for days before they decided to have me, her illegitimate younger sister, marry in her stead. Lavinia, of course, secretly entered the palace and became Lavinia, the Empress's favored companion. In my past life, I was the stumbling block in her and the Duke's great romance, their shadow, their cover, their scapegoat. When they were discovered, rebellion broke out. I had saved a group of refugees and was still accused of treason, with the Duke himself pointing a finger at me, condemning me to die when their grand cause triumphed. They called those refugees raiders. But those so-called rebels were my people, citizens of great key, with flesh, blood, and families. They used to smile and call me miss. They'd kneel before me, tears in their eyes, thanking me as if I were a living bodhisattva. They'd ask me when the world would finally know peace. When I watched their heads roll onto the ground, something inside me shattered. In the end, they beheaded me to hang my head on the city wall as a warning, branding me a traitor. Now, I have been reborn. This time, I will take revenge for them. And for myself. My father was merely a fifth-rank official, barely allowed near the court. That we could ever form a marriage alliance with the Julian family was thanks to Lavinia's reputation as a gifted beauty and among the capital's noble ladies. It should have been a perfect match. But the Empress disapproved, looking down on our humble family. Halfway through the marriage discussions, the match was almost snatched away. At the crucial moment, rumors spread from the Duke's manor claiming that the groom-to-be was impotent. The noble family the Empress favored immediately withdrew their proposal. And so, Lavinia appeared to strike gold. But fate loves its irony. Lavinia heard the same rumors and refused to marry him. Our foolish parents, doting on her as always, ordered me to take her place. In my past life, I had accepted willingly, thinking, so what if he cannot perform? As long as he treats me kindly, it's still better than starving at home like a servant girl, beaten and frozen every winter. But I was naive. The Duke's manor was hell itself. From the first day I entered, everything went wrong. In this life, I agreed again. Only this time, when no one was watching, I let the corner of my lips curl into a smile, wild and sharp. Come then. Let's all die together this time. Those who perished for their grand love last time must have felt lonely on the road to the underworld. Let's make sure they have company. I dressed for the wedding once more, waiting for the red bridal sedan to carry me to the Duke's manor. Lavinia came to see me off. She looked at me coldly. "You're truly lucky," she said, "to marry in my place. What fortune. That overwhelming wealth. I'm gifting it to you for free. You'd better know how to cherish it." Just as in my previous life, though I was the one sacrificing everything, I still had to thank her. I lowered my head in feigned guilt. "Sister, you're right. Such fortune will surely destroy someone as insignificant as me. Especially since Julian is your beloved. I wouldn't dare touch him. Could you lend me your dagger, the one you keep by your side? If it turns out Julian isn't truly unable, I'll kill myself before him. I would never share his bed or steal your happiness. But if he is impotent, I'll send the dagger back to you. Then you may seek another path." My words were so sincere that Lavinia's expression softened. She actually gave me the dagger. I slipped it into my sleeve, smiling sweetly as I left to marry. When I arrived at the manor, I sat obediently on the bridal bed, pretending to be the shy, hopeful bride awaiting her husband. Julian dismissed the guests, then returned and lifted my red veil with a jade rod. The moment he saw me, his face twisted. He pointed at me, trembling. "You? Where's your sister? Where's Lavinia?" I smiled and told him the truth. "She heard you were impotent, so she sent me in her place." "Impossible. My gentle Lavinia would never do such a thing." Pain twisted his handsome features. then let out a low sigh. He slapped me hard. The blow sent me sprawling onto the bed. You filthy woman. Don't think marrying in her place means I'll ever accept you. You're not worthy. Once I bring Lavinia back, you'll serve as our foot-washing maid. His words cut deeper than before. In my past life, he'd done worse, beating me the entire wedding night. He couldn't send me home without ruining Lavinia's reputation. So he tortured me instead, only to discover later that Lavinia had already fled into the palace out of fear of scandal. But this time, I wouldn't let her escape. Brother-in-law, I said softly, coughing as if weak. Sister left a message for you. Julian froze, eyes lighting with desperate hope. What did she say? He leaned closer. His handsome face filled my vision. I smiled faintly. She said a man like you, impotent and useless, deserves hell. Then I drove the first blade straight into his face, slashing down through his lips so he could no longer speak. The second plunged into his lower back, crippling him completely. As he clawed at the floor, eyes wide with terror, I laughed. Don't be so hasty, Your Grace. We haven't even shared our wedding wine yet. Julian looked up at me, horror clouding his eyes. I wrapped him in the red bed cover, gagged him with a strip of silk, and began stabbing again and again, each thrust deliberate, each wound shallow enough to prolong his agony. After all, I knew exactly which spots hurt the most without killing Lavinia, and he had taught me that in my last life, when they tortured me before beheading me. See this dagger? I whispered. You gave it to Lavinia. Do you know what it meant? It meant she wished you a quick death. I'm just granting her wish slowly. While murmuring to him, I cried out louder for anyone outside to hear. Your Grace, please be gentle. Ah, not so rough. My father's spies outside would hear and rush back to report to Lavinia that the Duke was no impotent man. He had even taken me. The play was only beginning. I laughed harder, stifling the sound with my hand so they wouldn't hear the madness beneath. It wasn't long before I had Julian gasping for breath, inhaling more than he could exhale. I couldn't let him die so easily, not yet. Those to that wretched couple had to be made incapable of ever hurting anyone again. Don't let his lovesick head fool you. Julian still had plenty of backers at court. If I wanted to remove him as a threat to the realm, I had to ruin him utterly, and bury Lavinia and her natal family with the old me. That would be perfect. The final blade I drove straight between his legs. When the look of utter despair flashed across his eyes, I laughed softly. Now you truly can't stand. Guess what your sister will say when she sees you? After saying that, I sat back and waited. Not long after, someone outside cried, My lord, people from Reginald's household are here. They say their illegitimate daughter knocked Lavinia out and took her place to enter the prince's mansion and enjoy luxury. How shall we handle this? These people were shameless beyond my imagination. Send in the steward who arranged the palace gifts. Bring him forward to uphold the law. I knew the emperor doted on this son. He would never imagine that in barely 2 years this son would storm the palace with a knife to seize the throne for the sake of my beloved Lavinia. The steward outside seemed reluctant to listen to a pretend princess. At that moment I stomped down hard on Julian's wound. He screamed. The door was thrown open and a crowd poured in. They found me with the dagger at Julian's throat, sitting elegantly on the blood-stained bed, grinning wickedly. Help, murder, someone shrieked. Shut up, I snapped. Call the palace steward and a Reginald household. Then I leaned close to Julian and hissed. See? My Lavinia came to check if you'd died. If you hadn't, how else could she enter the palace as a consort? No, Julian coughed up blood and couldn't finish the sentence. Soon many people filled the room. To my surprise, the emperor, who had never appeared in this scene in my previous life, stood framed in the doorway in a black cloak. He was in his 40s but strong-bodied. Not the gaunt, sorrowful figure I had once known. He strode in without a hint of fear. The guards behind him formed a human wall, as if protecting him from me. When the Reginald family arrived and saw the scene, their jaws dropped. They trembled and pointed at me. Lavinia shrieked. You're mad. How could you do such a thing? Julian. Anyone with eyes could see what had spilled between Julian's legs and the mess on the floor. Lavinia covered her mouth and trembled. I feigned even greater astonishment, tossed the dagger to the floor and looked at my Lavinia. Sister. What are you talking about? Didn't you tell me to do this? The emperor frowned and glanced at the Reginald clan kneeling on the ground. They turned pale as death. My father, shaking, lost control and wet himself. The emperor's brow tightened. He waved his hand. Lock up the Reginald household. As for her, he pointed at me. Take her to the side chamber. I will interrogate her myself. Your Majesty, please save my lord, he's in such a condition. Julian steward Cowed, pleading for the prince. What is there to cry about? I am no physician. Fetch a doctor if he needs one. The emperor replied, and then led the way to the side chamber. I was a little stunned he showed no fury. He had always doted on his son. This restraint was odd. Once inside the side chamber he dismissed everyone but the two of us. You did this on purpose today? You're also a soul returned from the past? The emperor asked. I fell to my knees with a dull thud. Yes. I know I have committed a capital crime. But they believed themselves above love and above your life. Such unfaithful, unfilial people deserve no good end. I had expected to die then and there. But somehow there was still a flicker of hope. You have resolve. In my remaining days. You are one of the few who treated me kindly. Those beasts only know how to flatter and trample. What else can they do? I came today intending to rescue you. But since you have done this, soon I will send them to the execution ground. Thank you, Your Majesty. Aren't you afraid to die? I've died once already. What more is there to fear? You have done me a great service. I will find a way to spare you. Yes. They still threw me in prison. But not with the Reginald family. My cell was a special ward high bed. Soft cushions. Delicacies and fine food. Across from me, the Reginald deaths were treated brutally, dragged out one by one for interrogation. Returning half dead. At first they spat and cursed at my cell. Now they didn't even have the strength. I sat eating grapes. Watching them. Feeling a rare serenity. You beast, why did you do this to us? Won't you be beheaded? Even if you live in luxury as a princess now, you'll still be killed. Confess it was you and I won't curse you further. I found it ridiculous. In the state they were in, they still spoke with that haughty tone. Have you ever considered that my aim was the execution of their entire clan? I said. Then laughed wildly. I wasn't lying, I hadn't intended to live. Lavinia fell to her knees with a thud. You've already harmed the prince. Why harm us? We did you no wrong. I pointed at her. You heard Julian couldn't perform and sent me to him. Knowing he preferred you. Of course he'd despise me. And that Julian wanted to keep his virtue for you, every one of them painted me as the villain. Fine. Then I would simply become worse. Anyone who harmed me would not live. Madwoman. Madwoman. My father trembled and shouted. But it was useless. I was the lunatic now. My being confined here was for the purpose of watching them lose their minds for me. To watch them crash into walls on my behalf. Even if they broke the walls and bled out, I would still smile. Then Julian returned. He had been emasculated a eunuch, now his complexion sullen and ruined. You wretch. He snarled. I came to kill you this time. I wasn't afraid. I sat on the small bed with languid poise. Utterly composed and utterly unbothered. If you could kill me, you would have done it already. For the sake of the royal family's reputation, you can only swallow your anger now. After all, I am the one who married into the royals. I am your wife. And that whore over there? She's nothing. Julian was so furious he nearly spat blood. He pointed at me, shaking with rage. But there was truly nothing he could do. I smiled faintly and pressed on. Let me guess, aside from not being able to kill me, you can't even change the way I live here, can you? He wasn't a fool. He understood exactly what I meant. His face turned scarlet. His jaw clenched so tightly that blood seeped from between his teeth. Your Grace. Your Grace. Please save me. Lavinia cried out pitifully. My sister has always been ambitious and cruel. She hurt you only to take revenge on us. But I still wish to spend my life with you. Julian's anger wavered. Truly? Even though I'd become like this, you still wish to marry me? He reached out, trembling, and grasped Lavinia's hand. Across the room, my father and the others exchanged hopeful glances. believing they could use Julian's influence to stage a comeback. If the emperor hadn't been reborn, perhaps I would have been concerned. But now, I couldn't care less. Lavinia wanted to live? Then she could live. But dying easily would have been far too merciful for her. How much better would it be for her to live bound together with Julian in endless torment? When I struck that day, I had been careful. I had severed something vital. Yes, gutted, but not cleanly enough to make him like the eunuchs of the palace. He could want, but he would never have. That thought alone filled me with a vicious, boundless joy. I turned my head back and laughed. Even if I died tomorrow, it would be worth it. Imagining the days they'd spend together, each one worse than the last. You're overthinking it, I said coldly. The crime you've committed is capital. At most, he can save one life. And I'm still alive. So, Julian, your beloved, can only enter your house as a concubine. As long as I lived, I was his legal wife. Without a divorce decree, no other woman could enter his household as a main wife. If Lavinia couldn't marry into the Julian family as the legitimate lady, she wouldn't survive. It was a perfect cycle, one they could never break. I would make sure that even in death, they would never be husband and wife in name. In our past life, how many had they killed in the name of their so-called love? The entire royal family. The soldiers at the borders. Even the court, half of them were lost because of them. If those in power could be so blind, what chance did the common people have? I never loved Julian. What I felt for him was pure, unfiltered hatred. And now, that hatred would only fester between him and Lavinia until they destroyed each other. You venomous woman! Julian roared. I'll repudiate you. I'll cast you out. I smirked. You think you're a commoner? A royal divorce requires the emperor's decree. Otherwise, the only way I'll leave is as your widow. And when I'm executed, I'll be sure to take Lavinia with me. Time's running out. Your Grace, you'd better cherish what's left. The look of hatred twisting his face, knowing he could do nothing to me, was the sweetest sight I'd ever seen. Across from me, Lavinia held her tongue to preserve her affected gentleness. But her eyes, oh, those eyes were pure poison. Julian pointed at me again, shaking with rage until he nearly coughed up blood. But deep down, he knew I was right. You just wait, he snarled. I'll beg father for a decree to cast you out. Perfect, I said coolly. I'll be waiting. You've got 2 days. 2 days, the time left before my entire family was to be executed. My father, desperate, seized the chance. Your Grace, please, plead with His Majesty for mercy. This has nothing to do with us, it was all that wicked girl's doing. Please. But Julian didn't even glance his way. He turned on his heel and left. Love-addled fools lived in a world all their own. I sneered at my father. Save your breath. In 2 days, you'll have plenty of time to scream when they take your head. You ungrateful wretch. You'll be struck by lightning for this, you'll die a cursed death. When you killed my mother, did you think of retribution then? I asked coldly. She was your lawful wife. But to curry favor with nobles, you forced her to degrade herself as a concubine. Later, fearing she'd bear you a legitimate heir that your in-laws wouldn't approve of, you strangled my twin brother at birth. A boy and a girl, do you know how rare that is? And you killed one just to please your new family. You even fed my mother poison for years until she bled herself to death before she turned 30. I stared at him, hatred coiling in my chest. I wanted to slit his throat right there, but the timing wasn't right. You know? His lips trembled. He thought he had hidden it perfectly. How could I possibly have found out? I laughed softly. All thanks to your darling daughter. On my wedding day, she threatened me, said if I refused to marry, she'd make me end up like my mother. Who would have thought? In my previous life, I'd been too broken, too afraid to resist. I'd told myself a weak woman couldn't fight against the unfairness of the world. But in this life, forget fairness. I'd dig up every last one of them with my own hands. Lavinia's face turned ashen, but she still lifted her chin. You're a whore. And your mother was one too. Soon I'll be the princess again. And you'll be dead. Good, what out a low sigh, I said with a cold smile. Then you can die with your parents. And even in death, I'll still be the legitimate princess while you'll only ever be a concubine. A concubine to a crippled man. I wanted to choke on laughter watching them seethe. Watching their faces twist with fury. Then they tried a new tactic. My mother, usually cruel and cold, fell to her knees crying, begging me to spare them for the sake of my little brother. He's just a boy, she sobbed. He's always been close to you. Close? I gave no answer. I only looked at that dear brother of mine, whose greedy eyes lingered on my untouched meal. Years later, he would be the one to hand me over to his subordinates. By then, I was a prisoner, a stain on their love story. They said I was the obstacle standing between Lavinia and Julian's eternal devotion. So he ruined me slowly, deliberately, but didn't let me die. Lavinia wanted me alive long enough to watch her ascend the throne. I suffered for years before she finally achieved her wish, becoming empress, and had me executed publicly. They all deserve to die, I whispered. Every last one of them. Softness? Mercy? I had none left. They'd carved it out of me long ago. Near midnight, Julian returned. In his hands, he held an imperial decree, a pardon for Lavinia. And oh, how exquisite the emperor's cruelty was. The edict stated that Lavinia had long shared a bond with Julian and was now carrying his child. It called the unborn babe Julian sole heir and permitted Lavinia to marry him as a concubine. When the decree was read aloud, the entire hall fell silent. Only I laughed loud and unrestrained, until I could barely breathe. Congratulations, I said between fits of laughter. Truly. Congratulations to both of you. What a blessed union indeed. The reason Lavinia remained unmarried was simple: she had kept her chastity. Otherwise, how could the emperor have ever favored her? Now, this new account painted her as a concubine in the prince's mansion. Yet still mocked by all. In the end, she wouldn't even qualify as a noble consort, let alone a side consort or the official princess. Lavinia broke down and wept. While Julian's face turned an ugly shade of black, my father immediately fell to his knees, begging Julian to spare their lives. But Julian, his voice icy, replied with thinly veiled impatience. Perhaps he had suffered much at the emperor's hands lately, for his tone was colder than ever. What are these people to me? I have already done all I could to save her. If you wish to live, follow me. If not, stay here and meet your fate. Once, he had loved her deeply. But when things began to fall apart, that love evaporated like dew under the sun. That's meant for you. Lavinia, desperate to live, nodded through her tears. In the end, she was wrapped in a quilt and carried away like a sack. Behind them, my father pleaded. Your Grace, we are your in-law, so can you watch us be executed? Julian turned back with a cold, cutting glance. Do you no longer understand protocol? The family of a concubine counts for nothing. You are merely outsiders. In my past life, he had treated those in-laws with the utmost kindness. All the villains became me, and all the goodness belonged to them. This time, I was still the villain, but they could no longer play the saints. 10 And the day of execution, I dressed in the scarlet gown of a lawful wife, while they wore prison garb. But before one's beheading, the hair must be unbound. One cannot very well wear jeweled ornaments to the execution ground. On the way to the marketplace, having fulfilled my seizure, the crowd pelted us with vegetable leaves and rotten eggs. I couldn't help but notice someone seemed to be deliberately targeting me, throwing far more than at the rest. We were already doomed, with such hatred still necessary. Before the sentence, each of us was taken into a side room to confirm our identity. One by one, we were sent back out to kneel and await the executioner. I was calm throughout. I had done all that needed doing. The emperor had made no promise to save me. Still, knowing he too had been reborn was enough. At least this time the nation would be at peace, for he could now discern loyalty from treachery. The roots of disaster, I had already pulled them out for him. Meanwhile, my father and mother screamed and struggled, refusing to accept their fate. My younger brother wailed that he didn't want to die yet, that he still wanted to play with crickets, to attend the academy. I laughed. I laughed so loud that it silenced them all. Oh my, you're going before me, that's perfect. I'll get to watch your heads roll. Your blood splatter everywhere. Filthy, hunting so filthy. Yes, but how delightful. I burned mountains of paper money for mother before She must be quite wealthy in the underworld now. I wonder if she's bought herself some demons to torment you properly when you arrive? Perhaps it was my words, or perhaps they had simply gone mad, but they were all terrified beyond reason. Dragged off one by one. My father wet himself all the way there. And the executioners kicked him in disgust. The man probably ruined his kidneys from too many concubines. When I saw them taken to the scaffold, I almost felt eager, wanting to step aside and watch the spectacle unfold. But suddenly, a large hand seized my arm. A low voice laughed. You truly wish to die, don't you? Come with me. I was pulled into a small hut. A woman of similar stature, filthy and reeking of wine, was shoved toward the guards. She, a condemned prisoner. Take her first. The man who took me away was none other than the emperor himself. I had not expected him to come in person. After a long silence, I was cleaned up and veiled, standing quietly by his side. From the second-floor window overlooking the marketplace, we watched as my entire family was executed. Blood drenched the ground. No one brought them a final meal. No one came to claim their bodies. I watched it all, my face expressionless, then bowed to the emperor. My deepest thanks, Your Majesty. He lifted me to my feet and took me to a secluded residence. He said he was grateful for the care I had given him in his past life. In his final moments, he said if I wished to leave, I could go, but there was another option. I asked quietly, and what would that be? He placed a chess piece on the board and said, many of my sons are far too ambitious. The royal house is ruthless. But I need someone I can trust to gather proof for me. You are that person. 11. I touched my face, worried. Though a mere concubine's daughter, I had been seen by many over the years. Some might still recognize me. He smiled faintly. No matter. I know people who can alter your features slightly. A woman, too, can achieve great things. Will you aid me in securing the throne? I knelt. Your servant greets Your Majesty. Long live the emperor. Not servant girl, but servant. And so, I underwent subtle facial alterations in that countryside estate. 3 months later, I resembled my former self by only 70% and was far more beautiful. Soon after, a new establishment appeared in the capital, the House of Spring Breezes. Its proprietors was elegant, charming, and shrewd beauty who ran her business with brilliance. Before long, nobles and officials flocked there to dine and drink. I trained a secret network of informants. Every whisper they gathered was passed directly to the emperor. Outsiders believed my place to be the safest in the city, a haven where secrets never left the room. Even when spies kidnapped my people and tortured them for information, none ever spoke. Thus, my establishment became the favored place for powerful men to discuss their grandest schemes. Julian came too. Lately, he had discovered that both his father and a crown prince were eating away at his remaining power. Once a favored son, he was now crippled and forgotten. His former allies had all defected to stronger patrons. He raged and drank, dreaming of marrying a high-born lady to restore his status. Such foolish ambition. Did he really think anyone would hand their daughter to a ruined man? The emperor hadn't even bothered to conceal the truth. All of the capital knew that Julian's impotence stemmed from the woman he once claimed was his soulmate. When she rejected him, he substituted me, his concubine-born sister, and I had, in my madness, truly made him impotent. Now, stripped of his manhood and his title, who would marry him? Once, he had been the city's most charming prince, the man every maid and dreamed of. Now, he was nothing but a worthless cripple no one wanted. 12. He drank to numb the pain. I, ever so sympathetic, poured him another cup and sat beside him with a faint smile. My lord, I murmured, wine deep in sorrow. He blinked, his eyes hazy with drink. You ate too? You look so much like someone I once knew. Oh? I'm the proprietors here. You can call me Madame Ja. Everyone else avoids you. Why come here and court trouble? I smiled. Madame Ja has always admired you. You know, that's why I ran away from home and opened this restaurant in the capital. Who would have thought? Things have changed so much. With that, I sighed softly. Julian seemed starved for affection lately. When he heard me speak, he suddenly grabbed my hand. Is what Madame Ja says true? But I hadn't fulfilled my obsession. I've lost everything. I'm a useless man now. My father must see me as a disgrace. How could you be useless? I've heard your concubine was already pregnant before everything went wrong. If that child is born and raised well, it could be of great help. If it's a son, you still have a chance to rise again. As soon as I finished speaking, his eyes brightened. He left without even drinking his wine, rushing back to his mansion. Later, my informant in the royal palace reported that Julian had been searching for a man who looked similar to him, then had him appointed as his personal guard. And not just one, but several. I nearly burst out laughing. Lavinia, I wonder how you feel about your husband and finding other men to satisfy him in ways you can't. For all her pride in being the high-born noblewoman, she was now nothing more than a glorified courtesan. At least a courtesan could choose her lovers. But she couldn't. She'd have to get pregnant soon. And the baby had to be born early. And once she was pregnant, there was no escaping the need for birthing stimulants or even blood-breaking herbs. Those things were incredibly damaging to the body. I wasn't sure if my fragile, weak Lavinia would even survive them. Naturally, the news of all this reached the Emperor's ears. Though the part I played in it was carefully hidden. He placed the piece on the board inside. It's time to close the net. To still be trying to fight for my position, despite everything, shows he has unyielding ambition. I had planned to spare him. But now, having lost a piece, the Emperor sighed deeply. Do you think an emperor is heartless? I shook my head. In the past life, you had love, but it was torn away by Julian. In the name of love, he stole your concubines, harmed your children, and destroyed the people's lives. A woman thinking like this? You're not the kind of person who could be shut away in the harem anymore. The Emperor tapped the table a few times before saying, when this is done, you'll call me father. Father. I didn't object, knowing I had no reason to, though I didn't fully understand the Emperor's motives. I knew that at this moment, his priority was the people of the Empire. Months later, my Lavinia gave birth. She struggled for days and nights, her voice growing hoarse. Finally, having fulfilled my sigh, she gave birth to a small, premature baby boy. The Julian family held a grand feast to celebrate. But I heard whispers that Lavinia had lost a great deal of blood and was lying there, her breathing shallow and labored, near death. I walked calmly into Lavinia's courtyard. To my surprise, there was no guard, and the stench of blood in her room was overwhelming. I approached her bed, and before I could speak, a young maid rushed forward. Who are you? Before the maid could finish, one of my hidden guards knocked her out cold. You look so pleasant now, I said mockingly. A goddess of heaven, what does that matter when you become a mere vessel for someone else's child? Why you? Who are you? Lavinia's eyes were dull, her face ashen. Ever since she had been tainted by another man, Julian must have lost all affection for her. I removed my mask. Do you still recognize me, my dear sister? It's you, Ed almost sigh. It's you. You've all wretch. My appearance had changed over the years, but my voice and the long years we had spent together were enough for her to recognize me. Yes, good. I'm a wretch. But what about you? How many men who look like the prince did you serve to get pregnant with this child? 1? 2? 3? No. Stop it. Why didn't you die? For a moment, she seemed to regain some strength, pushing herself up to strangle me. I took a single step back, and she collapsed from the bed, her body covered in blood. You sought after wealth and status by pleasing a man. And now you've been sold by him. How does it feel? Even if you die now, he won't shed a single tear for you. You've already given him the child he wanted, the one who will help him climb even higher. Here's something to leave you with. It was I who forced you to get pregnant. Lavinia's eyes bulged, red with rage, as though she wanted to devour me. But it was impossible, she didn't have the strength left. I stood still, and as her hands weakly reached for me, they slowly fell. She twitched on the ground a few times and then lay still. I spat on her and walked away, my guards following me. In the front courtyard, music played. In the back, Julian's favorite concubine had just died. The next one, naturally, would be him. One concubine's death didn't make much of a ripple, just a faint cough and taken out of the city to be buried wherever. Julian, with some sincerity, had Lavinia buried beside my family's tomb. It wasn't far from the mass grave. Months later, I became the emperor's newly recognized foster daughter. He lavished attention on me and even formally made me a princess. The court was shaken. The day I was made princess was the same day Julian came to beg for a title for his son. With this boy, some of the older officials who had once left Julian's side returned to him. Even a certain princess in the palace had praised him in the emperor's ear. And so, he came to ask for the title. As long as the emperor officially named the child and entered him into the royal family's genealogy, the boy would have the potential to inherit the throne. Julian might be impotent, but with a son, he still had a chance to fight for power. Everyone knew this until Julian brought the boy into court and saw me. He froze for a moment. But then, down, with a wide grin, knelt and begged the emperor for the name. At that moment, I suddenly stepped forward and said, "Father, I have something to say." Julian's expression darkened, and he quickly spoke up. "You're just a woman, how dare you speak in court?" I smiled slightly, pulling out the inspection token from the Dart Inquiry Bureau. The emperor had established the bureau years ago to investigate corrupt officials. In that instant, no one in the court dared speak. Even Julian was shocked into silence. I'd discovered that this child is not Julian's. He was conceived through an affair with a guard after his concubine entered the household. The revelation stirred a massive uproar. "That's impossible," Julian exclaimed. "Father, look at this child, don't you see how much he looks like me?" Of course Julian had his story ready. He'd hired men who bore a passing resemblance to himself. I replied calmly, "Prince, don't hide it any longer. If you tell the truth now, you might spare the imperial house some disgrace." Julian pointed at me. "You're talking nonsense. A woman calling herself your subject, where do you get such gall? Where do you get such audacity?" The emperor waved a hand. "1xia is my appointed princess. Do you object?" Julian fell silent. I smiled slightly and clapped my hands. "Bring them in." 3 men of similar appearance were led in and prostrated themselves. "Speak. What are you? What dealings did you have with Julian?" These 3 had been planted in Julian's household even before I suggested it. Julian had planned to have him killed after the deed was done. But the men I'd arranged had saved them. One of us served as a covert guard for Prince Julian. One confessed. One day the prince summoned me and 2 others. In his presence we were forced to assault a woman. That woman was the prince's newly taken concubine. Later she became pregnant. And the prince sent men to hunt us down. Fortunately the princess rescued us. So there is at least a 20% chance the child in the prince's hands belongs to one of us. 5 children? And the other 2? The emperor asked. They were already killed on Julian's orders. I hadn't expected that beyond my 3 there were 2 more. Poor Lavinia, what a wretched fate. Julian denied everything. His face had gone ashen and he teetered on the edge of rage. At that moment I had a midwife from the palace summoned. She examined the infant on the spot and declared it a premature birth at least 3 months early. For such a child to have survived was by no means certain. The emperor was furious. That Julian dared to contaminate the royal bloodline was treason of the gravest kind. Julian begged for mercy. But the emperor, disappointment thick on his face, said, "Let Princess Xia handle this matter on my behalf. I am tired." I understood he had given me the chance to take my revenge with my own hands. Because the royal family could not execute by beheading, I had a cup of poison brought to the room where Julian was confined. When he saw me he backed away. "Impossible, no. Father would never kill me. Don't come near." Guards restrained him while I approached with the cup and smiled. "Prince, having fulfilled my objective, it's time to go. And if, when you reach the other side, anyone asks who killed you, tell them this: your wife personally gave you a cup of poison. You wretched woman. Spare me. I'll marry you properly again. From now on you shall be my only consort. But you're impotent. What then? My servants, you may choose any of them. Whoever you like. I'll have them with you. If none please you, name any young noble and I'll bring him to you." I laughed until I felt lightheaded. When you're dead I can still keep many favorites. Isn't that a pleasant life? I pinched his cheek and forced the cup to his lips. The poison was the one I had prepared, 7 steps poison. Within 7 paces it squeezes the soul out of a man, twisting life into torment. Julian couldn't endure those 7 steps. After only a few heartbeats he crashed into a pillar and died. They cast his body aside, and I returned to the palace to report. From that day I was both Princess Jia and head of the secret investigative bureau. Men grew 3 parts fearful at my name. Later, when I stood in court, no one dared utter a single complaint. When the emperor died, I aided the crown prince's ascension. Once his position was secure, I resigned my posts and drifted away to wander the mountains and rivers. What could compare to the tranquil joy of a peaceful age and the beauty of nature? To save Easton, who was gravely injured and unconscious, I decided to stand in for Yolanda, who had refused to marry him, and substitute as his bride to lift his spirits. After the wedding, I took great care of him, and finally, he woke up. I handled everything for him, inside and outside the house, supporting his business ventures. I thought my heartfelt dedication had finally touched my husband. But when I fell seriously ill and couldn't afford my hospital bills, being forced to leave, Easton was spending millions on jewels for Yolanda. Sienna, if it weren't for you stepping in and marrying me when I was vulnerable, I could have married the woman I loved and never wasted years with Yolanda. This is what you owe her. That's when I realized that Easton had been harboring resentment against me all these years. He believed my substitutionary marriage was a ploy, that I had taken advantage of the situation. He would rather remain unconscious forever than marry a woman he didn't love. I felt as if my heart had turned to ashes and returned home to await my death, but I perished alongside Easton in a fire at the villa. When I opened my eyes again, both Easton and I had been reborn, returning to the day of the wedding where I had substituted myself in. This time, Easton finally married his true love. Then, let out a low sigh, someone knocked at the door of my family's courtyard. A handsome young man, holding a gift, looked at me shyly and said, "Sienna, I want to pursue a relationship with marriage as the goal. I won't marry. Easton is a half-dead cripple now. Why should I marry him? If it weren't for you snatching the flowers, my son would never have ended up like that. You must take responsibility." Hearing such a fierce argument, I suddenly snapped out of the painful haze. Looking at the lively and familiar scene before me, I immediately realized that I had been reborn. This was the moment when Easton had been severely injured and unconscious, and his family was trying to force Yolanda to marry him. When they realized Yolanda's family wouldn't compromise, Easton's father, unable to get rid of the hot potato, turned to me in desperation. "Sienna, I know you're a kind-hearted girl. Easton is now unconscious, and if someone is willing to marry him and lift his spirits, he will be saved." I knew that Easton's father wasn't interested in lifting his spirits at all. He simply wanted someone to take care of his comatose son. If no one agreed, they might just discard him as a burden. In my past life, I willingly married Easton, whom I loved, to care for him, only to be resented and die miserably. This time, I swore I would not repeat my mistakes. But before I could respond, I heard a familiar voice anxiously shout, "No." I turned to see Easton, covered in sweat and limping, running toward me. Easton's father, seeing his son awake, was overjoyed. "Easton, you're awake." But Easton didn't care about anyone else. He immediately shouted at me, "Sienna, don't think for a second that you can take advantage of this situation." I understood then that Easton, just like me, had been reborn. "I love Yolanda, and I will never marry you." Despite his fractures and the bandages on his head, Easton hurried over, enduring the pain just to stop me. He was clearly terrified that he might marry me this time. Looking at the man I had once loved deeply, my heart felt bitter. After over 20 years of companionship, hard work, and careful care, I had helped him rise from nothing, only for him to resent and despise me in the end. "Easton, who wants to marry you? I wish you and Yolanda a lifetime of happiness." "Heh, it's good that you know your place." Easton thought of his reunion with his true love in the past life and confidently approached Yolanda. "Yolanda, marry me. I will treat you well for the rest of my life." But Yolanda didn't want him at all. Who would want to marry a cripple who wasn't valued? Yolanda's father was also a bit dismissive. You want to marry my daughter with empty hands? At least 2,000 and in betrothal gifts. Otherwise, no deal. Easton instinctively reached for his bank card, but found his pockets empty. Before he could ask his father for money, Easton's father wore a long face and said pitifully, Easton, our family was already in difficult circumstances. And we spent a lot on your treatment. We don't have any money left. I saw Easton's face darken, clearly surprised that, even after being reborn, he couldn't even come up with 2,000 for his true love. Suddenly, he looked at me and commanded, Sienna, hurry and give me 2,000. I couldn't help but laugh at his tone. Easton, are you a beggar? Just opening your mouth and asking me for money? And I don't even have 2,000. Easton, with an arrogant tone, said, your family are all workers. Can't you come up with 2,000? You're deliberately not lending me money because you want to ruin my marriage with Yolanda and marry me instead? Don't think so. I only love Yolanda in this life. And I will never marry anyone else. Now hurry and go back home to get the money. Don't delay my lucky day with Yolanda. I smiled faintly, mocking. Your true love won't marry you without 2,000? Then is this love? Or a transaction? As soon as my words fell, the onlookers couldn't help but laugh, their mockery evident. Easton, what I don't know, sigh, embarrassed by their laughter, turned red. He had been respected in his career for years and could buy millions in jewels without blinking. But now he couldn't come up with 2,000 and was being laughed at. In the end, he reluctantly signed an IOU, promising to pay it back soon, before happily carrying his bride away. Just before leaving, Easton cast a proud glance at me. I watched as he carried his bride, full of disdain and reluctance in his eyes. He was clearly too happy to soon. He wasn't the billionaire boss he used to be. And there would never be another fool like me. I had no interest in attending the wedding, so I returned home alone. When my brother saw me, he asked with concern, Sienna, are you all right? Our family knew I had always secretly loved Easton, so they were worried about me. I shook my head and smiled. Don't worry, brother. I'm fine. No matter how much love I have for him. After knowing Easton's hatred for me, after suffering and dying, all those feelings had been exhausted. I saw my brother observe me for a while, still worried, before sneaking out. The next morning, there was a knock on the door. My brother hurried to open it. Standing outside was Nathaniel, a tall young man I hadn't seen in a long time, carrying a large bag of gifts with more piled around his feet. Nathaniel, what's all this? I asked in confusion. Nathaniel's handsome face flushed slightly, and with bashful eyes, he looked at me and said, Sienna, I want to pursue a relationship with marriage as the goal. These are all gifts I bought for you. I was momentarily stunned. Even though it had been 20 years, I still remembered how close Nathaniel was to my brother, and how he was always so kind to me, bringing all kinds of treats and trendy things to our home. But after I got married, Nathaniel moved to the capital for work, and we lost touch. And next news I heard from my brother was that Nathaniel had tragically passed away at a young age, never even having got unmarried. As I looked at the man before me, I suddenly realized, for the first time, that Nathaniel had feelings for me. Seeing me lost for words, my brother hurriedly urged from the side, Sienna, just say yes already. Easton's married now. Don't keep hanging on to that one tree. If you ask me, Nathaniel is 100 times better than that guy. If I could start over, I would have already decided to forget Easton and move on. Watching the man before me, his face tense with anticipation, beads of sweat forming on his forehead, his eyes locked on mine as he waited for my answer. My heart fluttered. I smiled and nodded. All right. The moment my brother heard me agree, he broke into a grin, clapping his hands in delight. Great. You two are finally together. Let Easton, that blind fool, regret it. And it was only after starting a relationship with Nathaniel that I truly began to feel what it was like to be loved. In the beginning, he wanted to give me most of his salary. When I refused, he came up with all sorts of ways to buy me things. On our dates, He was always careful to stand on the outside to shield me. He knew all my likes and dislikes. Recently, Nathaniel's factory had been busy, and he needed to work overtime. So I prepared dinner and went to deliver it to him at the factory. But before he came out, I saw Easton limping toward me. When he saw me standing there with the lung box, he tilted his head smugly. "Sienna, why are you delivering lunch again? I'm married now, so you better keep your distance. But I'll let you off this time. Did you make my favorite braised pork?" He had once led a life of luxury, and now, the hardship of his current life felt like a punishment to him. I watched as Easton, while disdainfully looking at me, extended his hand to take the lung box. I took a step back and said, "Easton, who said I'm here to deliver food to you? Don't get too cocky." "Heh. Still playing hard to get? If you're not bringing me lunch, who are you bringing it to? Your family isn't here at the factory. The bag must be full of the plaster for my leg fracture, right? I could use it." I shot back, "This is for my boyfriend. It has nothing to do with you." But Easton didn't believe me, sneering, "You have a boyfriend? Who would want you besides me? Enough of these tricks. Just give me the plaster. My leg's been aching for days. I need to put some on. Go see a doctor if your leg hurts. Why come to me?" I said, growing impatient. I knew Easton felt invincible, because he knew how much I had once loved him. After we got married, Easton was not only unconscious in bed but also had a broken leg. His family ignored him, and I spent every day washing him, massaging his body, and enduring until he woke up. When I learned his leg fracture had lingering effects, I found a retired old doctor and begged him for a prescription to make a plaster. I personally bought the herbs to make it and applied it to his leg just to help him recover. But all that was in the past. My genuine affection would now only go to someone worthy. I had made these plasters specifically because I heard that Nathaniel's elders had suffered from an incomplete leg recovery. Not for this ungrateful scumbag. "You still have the nerve to say it's my fault? If you'd just given me $2,000, I wouldn't have had to rush out to work." Easton gritted his teeth. He wanted to rest, but he still owed his father-in-law's betrothal gifts and had to repay them monthly. Although Yolanda worked, she refused to contribute to the household, so he had to push himself to work even before fully recovering. He remembered that in his past life, after waking up, he rested at home for nearly half a year. Unlike now, where everything was so difficult, he thought that with his rebirth, life would be smoother. But so far, apart from successfully marrying Yolanda, everything else was a disaster. Even starting a business, he had no capital. Listening to Easton keep blaming me, I smiled and retorted, "Isn't this the life you chose? If you want to marry your true love, it's bound to be difficult. Otherwise, how could true love be precious?" I knew better than anyone how severe Easton's leg injury was. If he didn't rest properly now and kept pushing himself, he'd be left with permanent damage. Easton, I said, stunned by my words, was about to argue back when we heard a voice from behind. "Easton, what are you doing? You're married now, and you're still harassing other women?" Easton turned to see Nathaniel and immediately became quiet. "Nothing, Nathaniel." But before he could finish his excuse, his sister rushed over, shouting in panic, "Second brother. It's bad. Second sister-in-law and eldest sister-in-law are fighting again." "What?" Easton's face turned pale, and he immediately hopped on his bicycle and sped off. As he left, Nathaniel turned to me with concern. "Did Easton cause you trouble? I'll take care of him later." "That'd be great. Thank you, Nathaniel." I grinned, happily handing him the lung box. I thought I'd be hearing some gossip later. Easton had only been married for less than a month, and his family was already on the verge of chaos. It seemed I'd get to enjoy some free entertainment every day. After we had been together for a while, Nathaniel and I grew closer, and both our families were discussing officially making plans. That day, Nathaniel had to work overtime suddenly, so I took the money he gave me to buy wedding supplies. On my way, I ran into Easton. He was holding a pair of shiny male leather shoes and inspecting them, but he wouldn't buy them, which made the saleswoman impatient. "Are you buying or not? If not, stop touching them." You're ruining a brand new pair of shoes. Easton, who had once been in a high position, was not used to such treatment. His face flushed red as he retorted. Who said I'm not buying? I can look at them as much as I want. Then buy them. The saleswoman sneered, giving him a once-over. The shoes are already coming apart. If you can't pull out money from your pockets, don't stand here pretending to be rich. It's embarrassing. Easton tried to argue, but he couldn't. Because he truly didn't have the money. At that moment, he saw me and my pile of items. And his eyes lit up. Sienna, here's an opportunity, help me buy these shoes. I stared at him, speechless. Why would I buy you shoes? Easton stared at the things in front of me, snorting in disdain. Sienna, you're already buying wedding stuff and still pretending in front of me. You plan to wait until I divorce Yolanda and then swoop in to marry me. Don't you? I have a partner. I replied. This is for my wedding with him. It has nothing to do with you. Who are you trying to fool? You love me so much. Would you marry someone else? Easton didn't believe it. The saleswoman, unable to stand it any longer, intervened. This lady really does have a partner. Her partner is very generous with her. Unlike you both, poor and stingy. Sienna, I didn't expect you to bribe even the salespeople to lie for you. But no matter how much you try, I'm still not going to divorce Yolanda and marry you. But if you're willing to support my business, I'll give you a chance to be my mistress. I know you're reborn too, so you must understand my abilities. It would be an honor for you to be my mistress. Before I could react, the saleswoman shot me a look of disbelief and muttered under her breath, good grief. I thought he was just cheap, but now it seems like he's got a screw loose. I couldn't agree more. Realizing that reasoning with Easton was futile, I didn't bother explaining further, grabbed my things, and went home. In the meantime, Nathaniel and I were busy preparing for our wedding. On the day of the wedding, I sat in my room in a festive red wedding gown, waiting for the groom to arrive. The sweetness and happiness I felt were unlike anything I had ever experienced before. This time, I wasn't hastily stepping in to substitute as a bride. I was getting married in the proper way. Meanwhile, Easton's family erupted into another argument. After a series of sharp exchanges, Easton snapped and shouted, Yolanda, what do you do besides spending money? You don't help with the housework. And you don't contribute a penny to the household. If I had known this, I would have just waited to marry Sienna. I shouldn't have married you. This wasteful fool. Ha! If you're so capable, go ahead and marry her. Sienna is already getting married to her partner. You think she'd still want you? Yolanda retorted. Ridiculous. She would never marry anyone else. For the first time, Easton seemed panicked. He hadn't expected Yolanda to say such things. Could it be that Yolanda was also bought off by Sienna? If you don't believe me, go see for yourself. With your disability, the only person unfortunate enough to marry you is me. Yolanda sneered. Easton couldn't argue anymore. He immediately ran out of the house, his heart pounding with panic. When he entered the alleyway leading to Sienna's house, he saw a blinding flash of red from afar. His bad feeling intensified, and he pushed through the pain in his legs, running as fast as he could. Amidst the joyous sounds of drums and music, Easton saw Sienna, dressed in a brilliant red wedding gown, blushing as another man held her in his arms. No, this couldn't be happening. Sienna couldn't possibly be marrying someone else. Easton stormed forward, yelling, Sienna, what are you doing? Get off that man right now. I didn't expect Easton to cause trouble at that moment. Frowning, I said, Easton, I'm marrying my partner. Why are you making a scene? My brother stepped forward and shoved Easton aside angrily. Are you doing this on purpose? Just because my sister didn't lend you money to marry, now you're trying to ruin her wedding. Easton glared at me. Sienna, I know you're doing this just to spite me, pretending to get married with someone else. But you've gone too far. I advise you to stop this charade immediately. I had no words left for Easton. Perhaps because I had given him so much love in my past life. He believed I would always love him, no matter what. I had moved on from that failed marriage and found someone worthy of a lifetime of trust. Yet, He still thought I was just pretending to annoy him. Nathaniel, displeased, frowned and looked at Easton. Easton, I welcome you to my and Sienna's wedding banquet. But if you cause trouble again, don't blame me for being impolite. Nathaniel, this isn't the factory. I don't need to listen to you. Sienna's foolishness is one thing. But why are you also playing along with her acting? Easton retorted. My brother. Looking at Easton, who was refusing to leave, angrily said, Easton, when did I not realize you don't understand anything? Didn't you hear what my sister and her husband just said? They've already registered their marriage. And they're now legally married. Who's got the time to act for you? A neighbors also chimed in. Easton, did you hit your head too hard? If you don't want to attend the wedding, just go home. Yeah. Easton, stop making a scene. We're still going to the wedding. This guy's a joke. Who holds a wedding just to act for him? Have you even paid for the ticket? I was done letting Easton ruin my wedding. Nathaniel had held me for so long. And even if he wasn't tired, I was starting to feel sorry for him. I pulled out my marriage certificate from my pocket and held it up in front of Easton. Look closely. This is my marriage certificate with Nathaniel. The past is over. Now, Nathaniel is my legal husband. Easton stared at the marriage certificate in disbelief. He wanted to claim it was fake. That Sienna couldn't possibly be marrying someone else. But the deep steel stamp on it told him it couldn't be forged. In the photo, with the red background, Sienna smiled brightly, nestled closely with Nathaniel. Anyone who saw it would say this was a happily married couple. Easton couldn't accept this truth. His eyes turned bloodshot as he screamed. Sienna, how could you marry someone else? You've betrayed me. Sienna, do we have any relationship left? Who I marry is none of your business. I couldn't understand why Easton was throwing a fit. He had seen the marriage certificate and still insisted on causing trouble. If he truly loved Yolanda and hated me, shouldn't my marrying someone else and disappearing from their lives make him happy? Easton clenched his fists, staring at me. You're my wife. Of course. You can't marry someone else. I know you're doing this to spite me, right? You love me the most. How could you willingly marry someone else? Easton, Nathaniel shouted in fury, finally snapping. He lifted his leg and kicked Easton to the ground, then had him pinned down, ensuring Easton couldn't get near me. I found his words ridiculous. Easton, you're shorter than my husband. Not as good looking. And your position is way below his. You don't have his gentleness and care. Where does your confidence come from? Thinking I'd prefer you over him? As soon as I finished speaking, Nathaniel, who had been full of anger and forceful energy, blushed furiously and became too shy to even look at me. Easton's face was a picture of disbelief, his voice trembling as he asked, Sienna, how could you say that about me? But the neighbors who had gathered to watch seemed to share my thoughts. And they began chiming in. Exactly. Look at Nathaniel, he's tall, handsome, and just so much more charming than Easton. He was never a match. Even before. Now, he's a cripple and clearly has something wrong with his head. Someone like him isn't even fit to shine Nathaniel's shoes. Of course. Anyone with eyes can see who's the better choice. Who would pick Easton? A cripple, over Nathaniel? The voices grew louder. And as Easton heard them tear him down, comparing him unfavorably to Nathaniel, even calling him a cripple, he snapped. Shut up. I'm not a cripple. My leg will get better. I'll be a billionaire boss one day. How could I ever be less than Nathaniel? Some measly engineer. There was a brief silence before everyone started shaking their heads, clearly pitying Easton. I saw the blow to his eye and tightened my arms around Nathaniel's neck. Let's go, honey. We don't want to waste any more time. Nathaniel murmured softly, bending down to lift me into the car. Easton, seeing us, tried to follow. But a few strong young men quickly held him back. He could only watch helplessly as his wife left with someone else. He walked home in a daze. And as he passed by the neighbors who had been watching earlier, he felt their eyes on him. Their judgmental stares made him rush to the hospital. What did you say? Easton leapt to his feet, staring at the doctor in shock. The doctor, with a calm demeanor, said. I understand this might be hard for you to accept, but your leg cannot be fully healed. The fracture was severe, and if you had rested properly, there was a chance it could heal completely. But since you never rested properly, it's impossible for it to fully recover now. Doctor, are you saying my leg will never be the same? I'm going to be a cripple? Easton whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. Actually, it's not that bad. It's just a bit of a limp, and it won't affect your daily life, the doctor reassured him. But Easton couldn't accept it. In his past life, his leg had fully healed without a trace of the injury. So he had always believed that his injury wasn't serious and that it would heal with time. After his rebirth, he hadn't taken the leg injury seriously at all. He resumed working the very next day, standing for long hours without a second thought. Now, hearing from the doctor that the injury had been more serious than he thought, and that full recovery was no longer possible, Easton's world crumbled. He remembered his past life after he woke up. He didn't have to go through the pain of working hard every day. He stayed at home and rested, with Sienna taking care of him. She even managed to find a prescription, brewing herbal medicine for him and making plasters for his leg. He had never appreciated her efforts back then, but now he understood just how precious her care was. Without Sienna, he would never have been able to recover. Instead, he'd be just like he was now, a cripple, abandoned and by everyone. Stumbling, Easton returned home. But as soon as he stepped through the door, Yolanda was there, her face full of rage. Easton, you're married to me now, but you're still thinking about someone else. I want a divorce. Looking at Yolanda, who was behaving like a shrew, Easton regretted everything. He realized just what he had sacrificed for this woman. In his past life, Yolanda had never raised her voice at him. Even though she knew he was married, she had eagerly sought him out to be his mistress. But now, he was no longer a wealthy man, but a cripple, and all he got from her was disdain. He sneered. If I had been honest, how would you have ever had the chance to hook up with me? Yolanda's face flushed with anger. What are you saying? Now you're rejecting me because I'm with a cripple? You don't want to stay with me. Is that it? Fine, Huntington and say. I don't want to. I was cursed to marry someone like you. A troublemaker. Let's get a divorce now. Easton was done. All he wanted was to correct his mistakes and get back to the woman who truly loved him. Fine. We can get a divorce. But you turned me from a pure, unmarried woman into a second-hand bride. You owe me $2,000 for compensation. And the IOU you signed with my dad, you'll still have to pay it off, even if we divorce. Easton looked at Yolanda, whose words were all about money, full of greed and calculation. The anger he had kept bottled up exploded, and he punched her hard. One punch after another. He vented all his resentment and regret, until her cries grew faint. And only then was he pulled away. I looked at Easton blocking the factory door, and calmly said, Easton, I don't think there's anything more for us to discuss. Easton,